A word before we begin. Some stories stay buried for a lifetime, not because we choose to forget them, but because remembering hurts too much. I'm going to tell you about Thomas Warren, a man who carried his brother for 55 years without knowing it, and the day that truth finally came to light. Maybe you know someone like Thomas. Maybe you served, or your husband did, or your son. Maybe you understand what it means to survive when others didn't. Maybe you've spent years asking yourself questions that have no good answers. This isn't a story about war, though war is in it. It's about what we carry, the weight we can't see but feel every single day. It's about the moment we finally give ourselves permission to set it down. If you've ever loved someone you couldn't save, this story is for you. The scalpel stopped. Dr. Phillips pulled back, forceps trembling under the surgical lights. The fluorescent bulbs hummed, that high-pitched whine that gets into your teeth. The nurse at his elbow took a half-step backward. Thomas heard her breath catch behind the paper mask. "Mr. Warren," the doctor said. His voice came out tight, careful. "I need you to stay very still." Thomas Warren, 79 years old and stubborn as a mule, kept his eyes on the ceiling tiles, white squares with tiny holes punched through them. He counted. 1, 2, 3. The way he'd counted seconds in a falling helicopter back when the world was on fire and his baby brother was screaming his name. 4, 5, 6. The smell hit him then, antiseptic and iodine, that sharp chemical tang that lived in every hospital, every clinic, every place where bodies got opened up and examined. It mixed with something else, the coppery smell of his own blood. "What is it?" His voice came out steady. After 55 years of practice, everything came out steady. The forceps clicked, metal touching metal. Something emerged from the inflamed tissue of his right calf. Something that shouldn't exist inside human flesh. Something that made the nurse make a small sound in her throat. A dog tag. Military issue, stainless steel. Cut in half, edges jagged and rough where it had been torn. The surgical light caught it, made it gleam. Thomas watched it rotate in the forceps, slow, like the whole world had gone underwater. Engraved letters stamped deep. Warren, Daniel J. 0483271560. Paz, Catholic. The nurse leaned in. Dr. Phillips tilted the forceps, exposing the other side. Hand-scratched letters, uneven, hurried. The kind you carve with a combat knife when your hands won't stop shaking. June 15th, 69. Live big enough for both. DJW. The recovery chair's vinyl stuck to the backs of Thomas's thighs through the thin hospital gown. Cold air from the vent made his arms prickle with goosebumps. His mouth had gone dry, that cottony metallic taste like he'd been chewing on pennies. "Mr. Warren," Dr. Phillips's voice came from somewhere far away. "How long has this been inside you?" 55 years, since Quang Tri Province, since the helicopter spiraled down through black smoke and Daniel pulled him from the burning wreckage. Since his baby brother pressed that piece of metal into his bleeding leg and said words Thomas had spent a lifetime trying not to hear. The overhead lights buzzed. Someone's shoes squeaked in the hallway outside. A phone rang at the nurse's station. 2 short bursts, then silence. Thomas opened his mouth. His throat clicked when he swallowed. "Since Vietnam." The words fell into the sterile air like stones dropping into deep water. Dr. Phillips set the dog tag in the surgical tray. It rang against the steel, a sound like a bell tolling, like something that had been waiting 55 years to be heard. Who was Daniel Warren? Thomas looked at the ceiling tiles again. 7, 8, 9. His hands gripped the armrests of the recovery chair. The vinyl groaned under his palms. His knuckles had gone white. The fluorescent lights were too bright. Everything was too bright. He wanted to close his eyes but couldn't make his eyelids move. "My brother." 2 words. They came out quiet, but they filled the room anyway. The nurse touched Dr. Phillips's shoulder, whispered something Thomas couldn't hear. The doctor nodded, still holding the forceps, still staring at the piece of metal that had lived inside Thomas's body for longer than most marriages last. "Your body formed scar tissue around it," Phillips said. His voice had changed, softer now, like he was talking to something fragile. "Built a capsule, like it was trying to protect something. Or bury it." Thomas couldn't tell the difference anymore. The dog tag sat in the surgical tray, catching the light. Daniel's name stamped into steel. The numbers that used to mean his brother was alive, was real, was more than just a ghost that showed up in Thomas's dreams at 3 a.m. Thomas's chest felt too small for his lungs. Each breath took work, pulling air past something lodged in his throat, something that had been there so long he'd forgotten what breathing easy felt like. The doctor was still talking. Something about chronic inflammation, about how the metal finally irritated the tissue enough to cause swelling, how Thomas's body had carried this foreign object for over half a century without killing him. How remarkable it was. How unusual. Thomas stopped listening. He stared at his brother's name, and for the first time since 1969, let himself remember the sound of Daniel's voice saying, "Now you can't forget me." Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now let's get back to the story. The recovery chair creaked when Thomas shifted his weight. Not much weight left on him these days, 170 pounds, down from 190 in his prime. The kind of shrinking that happens to old men. The kind nobody talks about. Dr. Phillips had left 20 minutes ago, maybe an hour. Thomas wasn't sure. The clock on the wall said 3:15, but that didn't mean anything. Time moved strange when you stopped counting ceiling tiles and started counting years instead. He looked at his hands resting on the chair's armrests, liver spots scattered across the knuckles like spilled coffee. The calluses at the base of his thumbs, permanent grooves worn smooth from gripping helicopter controls. 35 years since he'd flown, but the body kept the record anyway. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light, gold band, scratched thin from decades of wear. Patricia died 2 Octobers past. 729 days, but who was counting? He hadn't taken the ring off. Couldn't make his fingers do it. Some mornings he woke reaching for her side of the bed, found only cold sheets, had to remember all over again that she was gone. The apartment waited for him back in Catonsville. Second-floor walk-up, 18 steps he climbed every day, his right leg dragging on number 12 every single time. Her coffee mug still sat in the kitchen sink, white ceramic with blue flowers. The lipstick mark on the rim had faded to a pale pink ghost, but it was there. He saw it every morning when he made his instant coffee. Folgers crystals in hot water. Never tasted right without her sitting across from him at the little formica table, reading the newspaper out loud because his eyes weren't what they used to be. The mail piled up on the kitchen counter. VA benefit statements. Late payment notices for the cable he never watched. Something from Michael with a return address in Silver Spring. His son. 45 years old now, 18 months since they'd spoken. Since Patricia's funeral when Thomas said the wrong thing and Michael walked away and didn't look back. Patricia made him promise, those last days in hospice, made him swear on their 50 years together that he'd see a doctor about the swelling in his leg. "Thomas Warren," she'd whispered. The morphine made her words soft and loose. "You promised me 50 years of your life. Now I'm asking for one more thing." Her voice. He could still hear it if he tried. That slight rasp she'd developed after the second round of chemotherapy. The way she said his full name when she meant business. So, here he sat. Promise kept. 55 years too late to matter. The dog tag lay in the surgical tray on the rolling table beside him. He couldn't stop looking at it. Daniel's name stamped into steel that had been buried in his flesh since before Patricia, before Michael, before anything that had made up his life for the last 5 decades. The recovery room door opened. Different nurse this time, younger, maybe 40. Name tag said Jennifer. "Mr. Warren?" She held a clipboard. "Your son is here." The words didn't make sense at first. Thomas's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Michael, here. But Thomas hadn't called him, hadn't even told him about the appointment. Michael stood in the doorway wearing khaki pants and a blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Taller than Thomas remembered. Or maybe Thomas had just gotten smaller. His son was 45 now. When had that happened? The boy who used to climb onto Thomas's lap to watch Sunday football had gray threading through his dark hair. "How did you find out I was here?" Thomas heard his own voice, flat, careful. "Mom?" Michael stepped into the room, kept his hands in his pockets. "She called Dr. Phillips's office 2 years ago, before she got too sick. Left instructions that if you ever came in for treatment, they were to contact me as next of kin." The air conditioning vent hummed overhead. Cold air poured down, raising bumps on Thomas's bare arms under the hospital gown. She had no right to do that. "She was your wife for 50 years. Michael's jaw tightened, Patricia's stubborn jaw. She had every right. Dr. Phillips appeared in the doorway behind Michael, still in his surgical scrubs, latex gloves gone now. He carried a metal chart, the old-fashioned kind that made a hollow sound when you tapped it. "Mr. Warren." Phillips moved to the rolling table, picked up the dog tag with his bare fingers this time. "I need to explain what we found." Thomas's hands gripped the vinyl armrests. The material made a soft, squeaking sound under his palms. "This is a military identification tag, half of one." Phillips held it up to the light. The engraved letters caught the fluorescent glow. "Stainless steel. It doesn't degrade, doesn't rust. Your body formed what we call a fibrous capsule around it, scar tissue. It's a classic foreign body response." Michael moved closer to the surgical tray. His breathing changed, shorter, faster. Thomas heard each inhale through his nose. "The metal itself stayed inert for decades," Phillips continued. "But the inflammation around it became chronic. Something triggered it recently, maybe minor trauma, maybe just age. The swelling you've experienced over the last 3 months was your immune system finally trying to reject it." Thomas stared at the white gauze bandage on his right calf. Pink seepage had darkened a spot the size of a quarter. His leg throbbed with each heartbeat, a deep, bone-level ache that made his teeth hurt. Phillips turned the dog tag over. "The engraving on the back is remarkable. Done in the field, looks like, with a knife, probably a K-bar. You can see the individual scratch marks where each letter was carved." Michael reached for the tag. His fingers, long fingers, Patricia's fingers, hovered over it. "Don't touch that." Thomas's voice came out sharper than he meant. Michael's hand froze. He looked at his father. Something passed across his face, hurt, then anger, then something else Thomas couldn't name. Phillips set the tag back in the tray. The metal clinked against the steel. "This was placed deliberately into a wound, deep, near your femoral artery." He paused, looked at Thomas straight on. "Whoever did this knew enough anatomy to avoid killing you, but not enough to know it could cause serious problems decades later." The clock on the wall ticked. Someone pushed a squeaky cart past the door. A woman's voice over the intercom called for Dr. Nguyen to report to radiology. "Mr. Warren," Phillips said. "Who was Daniel J. Warren?" 10 seconds passed. Thomas counted them. The air conditioning cycled off. The sudden silence felt too loud. "My brother." Michael's head snapped toward him. "Your brother put this inside your leg?" Phillips's eyebrows drew together. "Why would he?" "We were shot down. Quang Tri Province, June 15th, 1969. Thomas heard himself speaking. Mission report voice, flat, no inflection, just facts. He was trying to stop the bleeding. A lie, part of the truth. Easier than saying what really happened in that rice paddy when the fuel caught fire and Daniel's hands were covered in Thomas's blood. Phillips glanced at Michael, then back. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Warren." Were you able to bring his remains home? No. The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. The nurse, Jennifer, shifted her weight in the corner. Her shoe squeaked on the linoleum. Phillips cleared his throat. Well, in a way, you've been carrying part of him all this time. That's something. Thomas pushed himself up from the chair, too fast. His legs screamed. White sparks exploded behind his eyes. He grabbed the chair's armrest, held on until his vision cleared. Can I leave now? Mr. Warren, we need to monitor you for infection. At least overnight. I asked if I can leave. Phillips's mouth pressed into a thin line. You'll need to sign discharge papers, against medical advice. Fine, bring them. Thomas limped toward the small closet where they'd hung his clothes. Each step sent lightning up his calf. The bandage pulled tight against his skin. His pants hung on a wire hanger, khaki work pants worn soft at the knees. His shirt, his belt. Dad, you shouldn't be, Michael started. Don't. Thomas pulled the hospital gown off, let it fall to the floor, stood there in his undershirt and boxers, not caring who saw. Old man's body, saggy and spotted and scarred. He'd stopped being ashamed of it somewhere around his 70th birthday. He got dressed, fingers fumbling with the buttons. Michael stood in the doorway watching but didn't offer to help. Smart boy. Thomas would have refused anyway. Phillips brought the papers. Thomas signed without reading. His signature came out shaky, old man's handwriting. He walked past Michael into the hallway. Fluorescent lights stretched ahead like a tunnel. The exit sign glowed red at the far end. His leg dragged. Each footfall echoed off the tile floor. Michael's footsteps followed. Dad, stop. Thomas kept walking. Past the nurse's station. Past the waiting room where an old woman sat knitting something blue. Past the automatic doors that whooshed open when he stepped on the mat. The parking lot heat hit him like opening an oven. June sun beat down on black asphalt. The air smelled like tar and exhaust and cut grass from somewhere. His Camry sat in spot 247. He'd parked it there on purpose. Same numbers as Daniel's grave plot at Arlington. Plot he'd never visited. Not once in 54 years. Thomas leaned against the driver's door. The metal burned through his shirt. Sweat broke out on his forehead, trickled down his temple. His leg wouldn't hold him much longer. He opened his fist. The dog tag sat in his palm. He'd taken it from the surgical tray when nobody was looking. Half a piece of metal that shouldn't have been inside human tissue. Daniel's handwriting on the back. 11 scratch marks per letter, carved with a K-bar knife in a rice paddy while smoke filled the sky. Live big enough for both Michael caught up, breathing hard. His face flushed red from the heat. Dad, we need to talk. Thomas looked at his son. Really looked. Saw Patricia's chin, her high cheekbones. But the eyes, those were Daniel's eyes, brown with gold flecks that caught the light. The same eyes that had looked at Thomas 55 years ago and said words he'd spent half a century trying to forget. There's nothing to talk about. He put a piece of metal inside you. Michael's voice cracked. Your own brother. Why would he do that? Thomas unlocked the car, got in. The vinyl seats scorched the backs of his thighs through his pants. He pulled the door shut. Michael grabbed the door before it could close, held it open. Stop running away from me. I'm not running. Then what do you call this? Thomas turned the key. The engine coughed, caught. The air conditioning blasted hot air that smelled like old upholstery and the pine tree air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. He looked up at Michael through the window. His son's face, twisted with something Thomas recognized because he'd seen it in the mirror for 55 years. Desperation. The need to understand something that had no good explanation. Thomas put the car in reverse. Michael slammed both palms on the hood. The sound made Thomas's foot jerk on the brake. His son's face through the windshield looked exactly like Michael had looked at Patricia's funeral. When Thomas said he didn't want to talk about Daniel, When Thomas walked away from the graveside and Michael shouted after him and Thomas just kept walking. 18 months ago, the last time they'd spoken. Thomas's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. Text message from Michael's number. "Don't you dare leave, not this time." Another buzz. Another text appeared below it. "I found Mom's storage unit key in her will. Unit 247. Ring any bells?" Thomas's hands went numb. The phone nearly slipped from his grip. The storage unit, Patricia's boxes, everything Daniel had left behind, letters, photographs, his Purple Heart, his service records. Everything Thomas had locked away after the funeral in 1969 and never opened again. Everything Patricia had been keeping for him, waiting for the day he might be ready to look. His son knew where it was. Thomas drove. Michael followed in his Honda Accord, a silver sedan that stayed 3 car lengths back the whole way. Thomas checked the rear-view mirror every block, his son's face behind the windshield. Set. Determined. Route 40 stretched ahead, 4 lanes of afternoon traffic, strip malls and fast food joints, a tire shop with letters missing from the sign. The pawn shop where Thomas had once tried to sell his Purple Heart before Patricia talked him out of it. The storage facility sat between a Jiffy Lube and a check-cashing place. "You store it," in orange letters that had faded to rust brown. Chain-link fence around the perimeter. Thomas pulled into the gravel parking lot. Dust rose in clouds behind his tires. He sat with the engine running, air conditioning blowing. The dog tag rested on the passenger seat where he'd set it, Daniel's name catching the sunlight coming through the windshield. Michael parked beside him, got out, stood there in the heat with his hands in his pockets. Thomas turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt too loud, just the tick of the cooling motor and the distant sound of traffic on Route 40. He opened the door. Gravel crunched under his shoes when he stood. His leg throbbed, deep, bone-level pain that made his vision swim at the edges. The bandage felt wet against his skin. "You need help?" Michael asked. "No." Thomas took the brass key from his son's outstretched hand. Old-style key, not the modern plastic kind, warm from Michael's palm. They walked between rows of orange roll-up doors. Someone had spray-painted Ravens 2019 on Unit 186 in black letters. A cat, orange tabby, skinny, darted between buildings and disappeared into shadow. Unit 247 sat at the end of the 3rd row. Same numbers as Daniel's grave plot. Same numbers Thomas had chosen for his parking spot that morning. Numbers that followed him everywhere, whether he wanted them to or not. His hands shook, fitting the key into the padlock. The metal teeth caught twice before sliding home. He turned. The lock popped open. "Let me." Michael reached for the door handle. Thomas stepped back. "Let him." Metal screeched when Michael hauled the door up. The smell rolled out, cardboard and dust and something else. Something that made Thomas's chest tighten. White Shoulders perfume. Patricia's scent. Faint but unmistakable. Like she'd been here yesterday instead of 2 years in the ground. Thomas stepped inside. Found the pull-string light dangling from the ceiling. Yanked it. A bare bulb flickered on, throwing harsh shadows across walls of cardboard boxes. Patricia's handwriting covered every box. Black marker. Neat capital letters even after 50 years of marriage, even after the arthritis twisted her fingers. Daniel. Letters home. Daniel. Service record. Daniel. Personal effects. Thomas. Vietnam. That last box sat by itself against the back wall, smaller than the others. Thomas stared at it. He didn't remember packing those things. Didn't remember putting them anywhere except as far from his mind as possible. "She did this," Michael said. His voice came from somewhere behind Thomas. "After you'd leave for work. I helped her move some of it in 2015, maybe 2016. 9 years ago. Thomas had been 70, still working part-time at the VA office, processing benefit claims for other veterans who'd come home with pieces missing. coming home every night to dinner on the table and Patricia asking about his day, never once mentioning she'd spent her afternoon sorting through the wreckage of his past. Why didn't she tell me? Would you have let her if she had? No. He would have locked it all in the basement, pretended none of it existed, the way he'd been pretending for 55 years. Michael grabbed the box marked Daniel, letters home, set it on the concrete floor. The cardboard sagged in the middle, warped from humidity and years of sitting in unair-conditioned storage. Thomas knelt. His knee popped loud enough to echo. The bandage on his calf pulled tight. Pain shot up his leg like electricity. He opened the flaps. Letters. Dozens of them stacked in neat bundles, tied with string. White envelopes yellowed at the edges, addressed to Mrs. Ellen Warren in Daniel's handwriting, block capitals the way they'd been taught in flight school, easier to read in turbulence. Return address stamped in the corner, APO, San Francisco, 96349. Thomas lifted the first bundle, 5 letters tied together with kitchen twine. His fingers left prints in the dust coating the envelopes. "You never read these," Michael said, not accusing, just stating fact. "No." "Why not?" Thomas didn't answer. He slid the top letter from its envelope. The paper crackled, brittle with age. Unfolded it with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. "Dear Mom, we made it to Da Nang yesterday. The place is hotter than Baltimore in August and twice as humid. Tommy's already checked our helicopter 3 times. I told him the Army mechanics already went over it, but you know how he is. Has to see for himself that every bolt is tight. The food here is terrible. Coffee's worse, but we're together, so I can't complain. Don't worry about us. Tommy won't let anything bad happen. He's too careful for his own good sometimes. Write soon. Tell Dad I said hello. Love, Danny." The paper trembled in Thomas's hands. He could hear Daniel's voice in the words, could see him sitting on his bunk in the sweltering heat, writing by flashlight after lights out because he always wrote home before sleeping. Thomas set the letter down, picked up another. April 3rd, 1969. "Mom, you'd be proud of Tommy. We flew through a storm yesterday morning. Couldn't see 5 feet in front of us. Radio was cutting in and out. But Tommy just put his head down and flew by feel. Got us back to base without a scratch. The guy's got instincts I'll never have. Makes me feel safe, knowing he's sitting beside me. Like nothing bad can happen as long as we're together." His vision blurred. He blinked. The letters swam. Michael crouched beside him, said nothing, just sat there on the concrete floor of a storage unit in the afternoon heat. Thomas opened the next letter. June 14th, 1969. Postmarked June 14th. Arrived stateside June 30th, 16 days after the telegram that said Daniel wasn't coming home. "Dear Mom, don't worry about the news reports you're seeing. We're fine. Tommy's being extra careful, maybe too careful. Tomorrow we've got a rescue mission near Quang Tri. Some unit got pinned down and needs extraction. Tommy's nervous about it. Says the coordinates look hot. But I reminded him this is what we do. We're pilots. We bring people home. I'll write again as soon as we're back. Give Dad my..." The letter ended there, mid-sentence, like Daniel had been interrupted. Called away to the mission briefing. Never finished the thought. Never had a chance to. Thomas folded the letter, put it back. His hands moved automatically, careful, precise, the way he'd been trained to handle flight checklists. Michael reached deeper into the box, pulled out an envelope. Different paper, white instead of the military stationery. Unsealed flap, addressed in Daniel's handwriting but never stamped, never mailed. "Tommy, if you're reading this, something went wrong." Thomas's lungs stopped working. "He wrote you a letter," Michael said. His voice came out rough. "The morning of the mission." Thomas took the envelope, lighter than it should be. Just one page inside. He could feel it through the paper. "Read it, Dad." "I can't." "You have to." Michael's hand on his shoulder, steady. Patricia's hands had felt like that once, before the cancer ate away her strength, before morphine made her fingers too weak to hold a coffee cup. Thomas pulled the letter out, unfolded it. The paper was soft, worn at the creases like someone had folded and unfolded it many times. Graves' registration probably, looking for intelligence, looking for anything that might matter to the war effort. June 15th, 1969, 4 a.m., 6 hours before the helicopter went down. Tommy, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you're not. That was always how it was going to go. You're the better pilot, better brother, better man. Don't do that thing where you make yourself responsible for choices that weren't yours to make. I'm writing this at 4 in the morning because I can't sleep, and you're snoring in the rack 2 feet away from me, and all I can think is, what if today's the day? So here's what you need to know. If I go down, I chose it. Nobody made me get on that bird. I want to fly those missions. I want to bring people home. You'll try to save me if something goes wrong, I know you will. But Tommy, save yourself first. That's an order. Same rank, I know, but still. Live big enough for both of us. Date that nurse you keep talking about. Patricia, right? Patricia. Marry her, have kids, teach them to fly. Tell them their Uncle Danny was just a regular guy who tried to do his job right. Don't carry me around like I'm some weight you have to bear. I'm not that heavy, brother. Love you, Danny. The letter slipped from Thomas's fingers, floated down to the concrete floor, landed face up, Daniel's handwriting still visible in the harsh light from the bare bulb overhead. Thomas's forehead hit the concrete, cold against his skull. His hands fisted in his shirt, the fabric bunched between his knuckles. A sound came out of him. Not crying, something that lived deeper than tears. Something he'd kept locked so far down it had calcified like the scar tissue around the dog tag. He told me not to carry him. The words scraped out, raw. He wrote it, and I never read it, and I carried him for 55 years anyway. Michael's hand stayed on his shoulder, didn't try to pull him up, just stayed there, steady. Thomas pushed himself to sitting. His palms were scraped from the concrete, little bits of gravel embedded in the skin. He brushed them off, left red marks behind. You didn't know, Michael said. I should have read it, should have opened the letter when they sent his things home. But I was afraid. His voice broke. He swallowed, tried again. I was afraid of what he'd say, afraid he'd blame me for getting him killed. And now you know he didn't. Now I know I wasted everything he died to give me. Thomas turned back to the boxes, saw the one marked Thomas, Vietnam. Smaller, set apart. He pulled it toward him. Cardboard rasped across concrete. Inside, his Purple Heart in its blue case. Daniel's Purple Heart, posthumous award, sent to their mother. Flight logs from 1969, discharge papers stamped honorable. And at the bottom, another envelope. Patricia's handwriting, addressed to him. Dated October 15th, 2022. 1 week before she died. His hands went still. What is that? Michael asked. Thomas pulled the envelope out. Heavy. 3 pages at least. The flap wasn't sealed. Patricia had just tucked it closed. Like she knew he'd need to get to it quickly when the time came. He opened it. Pulled out the pages. Her handwriting, still neat despite the morphine, despite the cancer eating through her body. She'd always had good penmanship. Nurses' training, she'd said. Had to write clearly so doctors could read the charts. Tom, if you're reading this, it means you finally went to the doctor. He couldn't read more. Not here. Not with Michael watching. Not in this concrete box that smelled like dust and his dead wife's perfume and 55 years of things he should have dealt with decades ago. He folded the pages, slid them into his shirt pocket, right over his heart where he could feel the paper's weight against his chest. What does it say? Michael asked. I don't know yet. You just put it away without reading it. I need to read it alone. Michael's jaw clenched, that stubborn set of his chin that was pure Patricia. You've been alone for 55 years, Dad. How's that working for you? Thomas stood. His legs screamed. He grabbed a stack of boxes for balance. Cardboard crumpled under his grip. "I need air." He limped toward the door. Afternoon sun hit him like a wall. Heat and light and the smell of hot asphalt. He kept walking. Past the rows of orange doors, past the Ravens graffiti, past the office where someone's radio played country music through an open window. Michael's footsteps followed. "Don't walk away. Not this time." Thomas reached the parking lot, leaned against his Camry. The metal burned through his shirt. Sweat broke out on his forehead, ran down his temples. The bandage on his calf felt soaked through. "I can't do this right now." "When then? Another 55 years? Thomas pulled Patricia's letter from his pocket. 3 pages, her last words to him, written when she could barely hold a pen, when every breath was work, when she knew she had days left, not weeks. What had she written that she couldn't say to his face? What had she known that he'd spent their entire marriage hiding from? Michael moved closer, standing in front of him now, blocking the sun. His shadow fell across Thomas's face. "Come with me," Michael said. "Right now. We'll drive to Arlington. Put that dog tag where it belongs." "I can't go there." "Why not?" "Because then he's really gone." "Dad," Michael's voice cracked. "He's been gone. You're the one who hasn't been here." Thomas looked at his son, really saw him for the first time in 18 months. Saw Patricia's eyes, Daniel's jaw. A man who'd spent his whole life trying to reach a father who was still stuck in a rice paddy in 1969. "Okay." The word came out before Thomas could stop it. Michael's eyebrows rose. "What?" "Okay, I'll go." "To Arlington? Right now?" Thomas nodded. His whole body hurt. The leg, the chest, the place behind his ribs where he'd locked Daniel away and thrown away the key. "But you're driving," Thomas said. "I can't. My leg." Michael grabbed the storage unit door, pulled it down. Metal screeched. The padlock clicked shut. They walked to Michael's Honda. Thomas got in the passenger seat. First time in 18 months he'd sat in his son's car. The interior smelled like coffee and the cinnamon air freshener hanging from the mirror. Michael started the engine, backed out of the gravel lot, pulled onto Route 40, heading east, toward Washington, toward Arlington National Cemetery, toward Section 34, Row 8, marker 247, where Daniel had been waiting for 54 years. Thomas's hand found his shirt pocket, felt the outline of Patricia's letter through the fabric. 3 pages, 50 years of marriage, 7 days before death. What else had she written? What else had she known that he'd been too frightened to see? Thomas sat on the concrete floor of the storage unit, his back against cardboard boxes. The bare bulb overhead buzzed, high-pitched whine like a mosquito. Daniel's letter lay on the floor between his knees. The paper had yellowed at the edges. 55 years of waiting in a box for someone to read it. "Don't carry me around like I'm some weight you have to bear. I'm not that heavy, brother." His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He pressed them flat against the concrete. Cold seeped through his palms. Grit embedded in his skin from where he'd scraped them earlier. "Dad." Michael's voice came from somewhere to his left. "We should go." Thomas couldn't move. His legs had gone numb from sitting. The bandage on his calf felt wet, blood or lymph fluid or both. His throat burned like he'd swallowed ground glass. "He told me not to carry him." The words scraped out. "Wrote it down. Made it clear. And I never read it. Never gave him that respect." Michael crouched beside him, picked up Daniel's letter, read it again, lips moving silently. "You couldn't have known. I should have opened it. When they sent his things home in 69. But I put the box in the basement and I never—" Thomas's voice cracked. "I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of what he'd say. That he'd blame me for getting him killed. That he'd tell me it should have been me instead." The bare bulb flickered, made their shadows jump against the concrete wall. "But he didn't say that," Michael said. "No. He said, "Don't carry me." And I carried him anyway. For 55 years. Thomas pulled Patricia's letter from his pocket, 3 pages folded together, her handwriting visible through the thin paper. He unfolded them. The creases had worn soft. "Tom, if you're reading this, it means you finally went to the doctor, and they found what I always knew was there. Some piece of Daniel you've been carrying inside." His eyes blurred. He blinked, kept reading. "I knew about the guilt from our first date. You limped into the VA cafeteria where I was working, and I thought, there's a man who's been wounded twice, once by shrapnel, once by surviving. I married you anyway, not despite the wounds, maybe because of them. I was 24 years old and thought love could fix anything. It can't. 50 years together and you were never fully here. Part of you stayed in Vietnam with Daniel. I've known that from the beginning. But here's what you never understood. I don't regret it. The part of you that was here, the part that made Sunday breakfast, that taught Michael to ride his bike on Westview Avenue, that held my hand through 2 rounds of cancer, that part was enough. You were a good husband, not perfect, but good. You were a good father. Michael loves you even though he can't reach you. And you were a good brother. You survived like Daniel asked you to. But Tom, surviving isn't the same as living." Thomas's hands shook so hard the paper rattled. Michael leaned closer, reading over his shoulder. "Daniel didn't save you so you could spend 55 years punishing yourself. He saved you so you could have a life. I'm writing this a week before hospice comes, clear-headed enough to say what I couldn't say to your face. Maybe because I knew you couldn't hear it. Maybe because I was afraid you'd leave if I pushed too hard. Forgive yourself. Not because Daniel's death wasn't tragic, not because you don't miss him, but because that guilt is killing the gift he gave you. Go to Arlington. Put whatever they found with him. Tell him thank you for the extra 55 years. Then come home and live. I'll be waiting for you, wherever souls go when bodies give out. All my love, always, Patricia." The letter ended there. No postscript, no additions, just her signature, the P looping wide the way she'd signed birthday cards and grocery lists and the mortgage papers on their first house. Thomas folded the pages, carefully, put them back in his pocket. The storage unit smelled like cardboard and dust and Patricia's white shoulders' perfume, like she'd been here yesterday. Like she was standing right behind him, waiting for him to finally understand what she'd been trying to tell him for 50 years. "She knew," he whispered, "the whole time. About the guilt. About Daniel. She knew and she stayed anyway." "Yeah," Michael said, his voice thick. "She did." Silence. Just the buzz of the overhead bulb and distant traffic on Route 40 and Thomas's own breathing, ragged and uneven. "When I was 8 years old," Michael said, "Mom showed me a picture of Uncle Daniel, told me my middle name came from him, Michael Daniel Warren." Thomas's head snapped up. "You didn't know." Michael's jaw clenched. "She never told you because she knew you'd refuse, say it was too much." "I didn't. She told me stories about him, how he sang off-key, how he'd give away his last cigarette to anyone who asked, how he volunteered for every rescue mission because someone's brother needs to come home." Michael pulled his wallet from his back pocket, opened it. Behind the clear plastic sleeve, a photograph, faded, creased down the middle. Daniel in uniform, grinning, 20 years old. "I've carried this since I was 8, Michael said. 27 years before he died. 18 years after." Thomas stared at the photo, his brother's face, that grin that made nurses blush and sergeants shake their heads, the face that showed up in Thomas's dreams still, even after all these decades. "You think you were the only one who knew him?" Michael's voice rose. "Mom made sure I knew him, because you wouldn't." The words landed like fists. "I couldn't," Thomas started. "I know. I get it now." Michael's hands shook when he put the wallet away. "But Dad, I grew up with a ghost uncle I loved and a living father I couldn't reach. You were both gone, just in different ways." Thomas pushed himself up. His legs screamed, pins and needles shooting from his feet to his hips. He grabbed a stack of boxes for balance. "I gave you everything I could." "You gave me leftovers." Michael stood too. "Whatever was left after Vietnam took the rest." They faced each other in the cramped space, father and son. 55 years and 18 months of silence between them. "I'm sorry," Thomas said. The words felt foreign in his mouth. "I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed." "I don't need an apology." Michael stepped closer. "I need you to stop living in 1969. "I don't know how." "Then learn, starting right now." Michael grabbed the storage unit door, yanked it down. Metal screeched. The lock clicked shut. "We're going to Arlington," Michael said. "Right now. You're going to stand at his grave and say what you should have said 54 years ago." "Michael." "No, I'm done watching you waste the life he died to give you." They walked to the parking lot. The afternoon sun sat lower now, 4:30, maybe 5. Long shadows stretched across the gravel. Thomas's leg dragged. Each step sent lightning up his calf. Michael opened the passenger door of his Honda. Waited. Thomas looked at his own Camry sitting 3 spaces over. Could get in, drive home, lock the door, sit in Patricia's chair and pretend none of this had happened. But Patricia wasn't in that chair anymore, and the apartment would smell like dust and old coffee and the ghost of her perfume on clothes he couldn't bring himself to donate. He got in Michael's car. The engine started. Cool air blasted from the vents. Smelled like cinnamon and old coffee. Michael backed out, pulled onto Route 40. They drove in silence. Thomas watched the scenery pass. The Jiffy Lube, the pawn shop, a billboard advertising injury lawyers. Route 40 turned into Route 50, heading east toward Washington. His hand found his shirt pocket, felt Patricia's letter through the fabric. 3 pages, 50 years of marriage, her last words to him. Go to Arlington, put whatever they found with him. The dog tag sat in his pants pocket, half a piece of steel with Daniel's name stamped in it. The piece that had lived inside his body for 55 years. The piece his body had wrapped in scar tissue like a pearl forms around sand. "Tell me something about him," Michael said, eyes on the road. "Something I don't know." Thomas's throat closed. 30 miles of highway stretched ahead, another 20 after that. "He couldn't sing," Thomas said finally. "Tone deaf, but he sang every morning anyway. House of the Rising Sun. Woke up the whole barracks at 5 a.m. "What'd you do?" "Threw my boot at him." "Did it work?" "He'd throw it back and keep singing." Michael's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Sounds like him, from the stories Mom told." "I hated that song," Thomas said. His voice came out rough. "Would give everything I have left to hear it one more time." They crossed the Beltway. Traffic thickened. Stop and go. Brake lights stretching ahead like a river of red. The Washington Monument appeared in the distance, white needle against blue sky turning pink at the edges. "You know what day it is?" Michael asked. Thomas looked at the dashboard clock. June 15th. The numbers glowed green. His chest locked. 55 years, exactly. To the day. "Mom knew," Michael said quietly. "She made the appointment for today. Made sure if you ever went to a doctor, it would be on the anniversary." Thomas couldn't breathe right. The air in the car felt too thin. Patricia had planned this, months before she died, maybe years, made sure that if Thomas ever finally faced what he'd been carrying, it would be on the day Daniel died, the day everything changed, the day Thomas stopped living and started just surviving. Memorial Bridge appeared ahead, white marble pylons, Potomac River below, water pink with reflected sunset. They crossed into Virginia, Arlington National Cemetery sign on the right, white letters on green. Michael took the exit. The cemetery opened before them, endless rows of white headstones stretching across green hills, thousands of them, tens of thousands, all the dead from all the wars, all the brothers and sons and fathers who didn't come home. Section 34, Thomas said. His voice came out hoarse. Row 8, marker 247. You remember the plot number? I picked it. Had to sign the papers. 1970. But you never came. No. 54 years and you never visited your brother's grave. Thomas's hands gripped his knees. No. Michael parked in the visitor lot, turned off the engine. Silence rushed in. Just wind in the trees and birds somewhere, and the distant sound of a lawnmower. You ready? Michael asked. Thomas opened the door, got out. His leg nearly gave out. He grabbed the car roof, metal warm from the sun. They walked, gravel path crunching under their shoes, grass perfectly mowed on either side, white headstones in perfect rows, each one identical, names and dates and branch of service, Section 34. The graves older here, Vietnam era, some from Korea. Thomas counted rows, row 8, started counting markers. Then he saw 247 and stopped walking. Because 3 men stood at Daniel's grave, elderly men, 70s, 80s. One wore a VFW cap, another had a Vietnam veteran jacket. The third leaned on a cane. Playing cards lay scattered at the headstone base. Jacks, 5 or 6 of them, weathered and faded, curling at the edges. The men turned, saw Thomas approaching. The one in the VFW cap went completely still, stared. Thomas Warren? His voice cracked on the name. Thomas's mouth went dry. How do you know who I am? The man stepped forward, white hair thin on top, liver spots on his hands, face creased with lines that spoke of decades lived. But his eyes, sharp and clear and full of something Thomas couldn't name. You look just like him, the man said. Same build, same way of standing. Even the way your shoulders slope. He extended his hand. Robert Williams. Your brother saved my life. Thomas's hand hung in the air between them. He couldn't make his arm move. Williams's palm stayed extended, weathered skin, thick calluses, fingers that trembled slightly. I don't understand, Thomas said. Williams lowered his hand. I was pinned under the cargo door. June 15th, 1969. Your brother pulled me out. The world tilted. Thomas grabbed Michael's arm, his son's biceps solid under his grip. The second man stepped forward, shorter, Hispanic, thick glasses that magnified his eyes. James Rodriguez. I was co-pilot on the medevac bird. We got you out. The third man limped closer on his cane, each step deliberate. David Thompson, medic. Treated your wounds in the helicopter. Thomas's legs wouldn't hold him. Michael's hand moved to his elbow, supporting him without making it obvious. You were there, Thomas whispered. We were there, William said. The wind picked up, rustled through the oak trees lining the path, carried the smell of fresh-cut grass and earth and something sweet, honeysuckle maybe, growing wild along the fence. Thomas looked past the 3 men at the headstone. White marble, standard military issue, curved top. He'd picked it from a catalog in 1970. Sitting in the funeral home while his mother sobbed in the next room and he signed papers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Warren Daniel James C. P. TUS, Army, Vietnam, Purple Heart. November 3rd, 1948 to June 16th, 1969. The dates were wrong. He'd told them that 55 years ago. Daniel died on the 16th, not the 15th. But the paperwork said the 15th, and paperwork was permanent. So the lie stayed carved in marble forever. Playing cards lay scattered at the base, 6 of them, all jacks, faded from weather, edges curled. One had blown against the stone. The King of Hearts from some other deck sat wedged in the grass. We come every year, Rodriguez said. June 15th. Thought it was the day he died. It wasn't. Thomas said. His voice came out flat. He died June 16th, 06:20 hours. I heard it on the radio. All three men went still. Thompson leaned heavier on his cane. You listened to your own brother's death being called in? Had to know. Silence. Just wind in the trees and a crow calling somewhere, and the distant sound of the groundskeeper's mower. We've been coming for 54 years, Williams said. His voice had gone soft. Bringing cards, paying respects. He gestured at the weathered jacks. He loved poker, would bet his last dollar on a pair of twos. Thomas's throat burned. He remembered. Daniel at the makeshift tables in Da Nang, grinning while he bluffed with nothing. Winner pots he had no business winning because nobody could read his face. We tried to find you, Thompson said. After the war, military wouldn't release your records. Thought you'd died. Maybe in country, maybe later. I didn't die. We can see that. Rodriguez pulled something from his jacket pocket, a photograph, creased down the middle, faded to yellow-brown. He held it out. Thomas took it. His hands shook so bad the photo blurred. 5 men in flight suits, standing in front of a Huey, the tail number visible, 68-15044. Their bird. Daniel in the center, Thomas beside him, arms around each other's shoulders. Williams, Rodriguez, Thompson on the other side. All of them young, all of them grinning like they'd live forever. He didn't remember the photo being taken, didn't remember smiling like that, like the war was an adventure instead of a meat grinder. 2 days before the crash, Rodriguez said, some reporter came through, taking pictures for Stars and Stripes. Thomas stared at his own face. 21 years old. No gray hair, no liver spots, no lines carved deep around his mouth from 55 years of not smiling. Your brother saved my life, Williams said again, his voice thick now. I need you to know that. He pulled 700 pounds of cargo door off my chest, while bleeding from shrapnel wounds, while the fuel was catching fire. Then he went back, Rodriguez added. For the others. We tried to stop him, told him the fuel tank was going to blow. He went anyway, Thompson finished. Thomas's hands clenched on the photograph, the paper crumpled at the edges. We heard the explosion from 200 feet up, Rodriguez continued. Secondary blast when the fuel ignited. Fireball that tall. He held his hand above his head. We couldn't go back, had wounded, had you. You were unconscious, Thompson said. Mumbling something, couldn't make it out over the rotors. Thomas knew what he'd been saying, same thing he'd said in his sleep for years, until Patricia started sleeping in the guest room because she couldn't stand hearing it anymore. Go back, go back, go back. Why are you here? Williams asked, voice gentle. After all these years? Thomas reached into his pocket, pulled out the dog tag. Half a piece of steel that had lived inside his body since before these men went home, since before they got married and had children and built lives on the foundation of surviving. He opened his fist. All 3 men stared. Williams reached out, stopped. May I? Thomas handed it over. Williams held it up to catch the late afternoon sun, read the stamped letters, turned it over, read the hand-carved message. His hand started shaking worse than Thomas's. He put this inside you, Williams said. Not a question, statement of fact. Yes. When? After he pulled me out, before he went back in. Thompson made a sound deep in his chest, like he'd been gut-punched. Rodriguez took off his glasses, wiped them on his shirt, put them back on. His eyes were wet. Williams turned the tag over again, read Daniel's message. His lips moved silently, forming the words, "Live big enough for both." Then he looked up at Thomas. Did you? The question hung in the cemetery air. A crow cawed. The groundskeeper's mower stopped. In the sudden silence, Thomas heard his own heartbeat in his ears. Did I what? Live big enough for both of you. Thomas's mouth opened, closed. No words came out. Because the answer was no. He'd survived. He'd existed. He'd gone through the motions of living, marriage, job, house, son. But living, really living? The way Daniel had lived, throwing himself at every moment like it might be his last? No. He'd been a ghost, walking around in a body that should have died in that rice paddy, taking up space that should have belonged to someone who deserved it more. No, Thomas said, the word barely a whisper. I didn't. Williams handed the tag back, carefully, like it was made of glass instead of steel. They stood in silence, 4 old men and 1 middle-aged man around a white headstone that marked where pieces of Daniel Warren had been buried 54 years ago. There's a bench, Williams said finally. Over there, under the oak tree. We sit there sometimes, when our legs can't hold us up anymore. He started walking. Rodriguez followed. Thompson limped behind, cane tapping on the paved path. Michael touched Thomas's elbow. You okay? No. You want to leave? Thomas looked at the headstone, at his brother's name carved in marble, at the playing cards scattered like prayers at the base. No, he said again. I want to hear what they have to say. They walked to the bench, wrought iron, green paint peeling. It sat 20 yards from Daniel's grave under an old oak that had probably been standing when the Civil War dead were buried here. Williams sat first. The metal groaned under his weight. Thomas sat beside him. The bench felt cold through his pants despite the June heat. Michael stood behind the bench, hand on his father's shoulder, steady. Rodriguez and Thompson remained standing, waiting. Tell us what happened, Williams said. The real story, not the after-action report. The truth. Thomas's throat closed. 55 years of silence pressing against his teeth, against his chest, against every cell in his body that had learned to lock things away and never look at them. It was my call, he said, voice barely audible. The mission, my call to go in. You were aircraft commander, Rodriguez said. That's the job. The coordinates were hot. Intelligence confirmed anti-aircraft in the area. I knew it was dangerous. Thomas stared at his hands, old man's hands that used to grip cyclic controls with confidence. Daniel said we should go anyway, said people were dying down there, needed extraction. Williams shifted on the bench. Metal creaked. I could have said no, should have said no, but I didn't. We voted, Rodriguez said. All 5 of us. We all agreed to go in. Thomas shook his head. You wouldn't have gone if I'd refused. I was in command. Nobody argued. Because it was true. We got hit 30 seconds after we started descent. Tail rotor gone. Started spinning. I tried to auto-rotate, but we were too low. Came down hard. His hands started shaking. He pressed them against his knees, left damp marks on the khaki fabric. Fuel line ruptured. I smelled it before I saw it. That sweet smell, like lighter fluid. Thompson nodded. He knew that smell. They all did. My leg was pinned. Metal spar from the frame went straight through my calf. Thomas pulled up his pant leg, showed them the fresh bandage, surgical tape and gauze. Same spot. Williams leaned forward, stared at the bandage. Daniel was thrown clear when we hit, landed in the mud. I saw him get up, saw him look at the helicopter, at the fire starting. Thomas's voice went flat. Mission report voice, the only way he could say it without breaking. He should have run. Fire was spreading fast, but he came back for me. Nobody spoke. He pulled me out. I was screaming, couldn't stop. Blood everywhere. He made a tourniquet with his belt. Thomas's hands trembled so bad he had to clench them into fists. Then he took his dog tag off, had his K-bar knife on his hip. He broke the tag in half, took one piece and looked at me and said, his voice cracked. He swallowed, forced the words out. He said, "Need you to remember something." I said, "Danny, don't." Thomas's chest heaved. Each breath hurt. He pushed the tag into my wound, into the open muscle. I felt it scrape against bone. Williams's hand covered his mouth. He said, "Now you can't forget me." I tried to grab him, but I was going into shock. Everything spinning, couldn't move right. He said, "Williams is still in there, others too." Thomas looked at Williams. "You were screaming. I heard you over everything else." Williams nodded, tears running down his weathered face. I said, "Don't leave me here." Thomas's voice barely a whisper now. He said, "I'm not leaving you. I'm making sure you live." Then he stood up and ran back to that burning helicopter. Rodriguez wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The medevac came in, grabbed me, pulled me up. I was yelling at them to go back, but they couldn't hear over the rotors. I watched from the bird, watched him pull you out, Williams, watched him go back inside. Then the fuel tank exploded. The words fell like stones into deep water. I saw the fireball, saw the bird collapse, heard the secondary explosions, heard the radio next morning. 0620 hours, June 16th. 1 KIA confirmed. Daniel James Warren. Silence stretched, long and heavy as 54 years. Then Williams stood, started unbuttoning his shirt. "What are you doing?" Thomas asked. Williams pulled his shirt open. A scar ran across his chest, thick, raised, keloid tissue from sternum to ribs. "Crushed sternum," Williams said. "The cargo door, 700 pounds of it. Your brother lifted it off me, while bleeding from 6 separate shrapnel wounds, while the fire was reaching for the fuel tank." He buttoned his shirt back up, slowly, fingers fumbling. "You think you're the only one who's carried this?" Williams's voice had gone hard. "I've carried it every day for 54 years. Every morning I wake up knowing a 20-year-old boy died so I could have breakfast." Rodriguez stepped closer. "I flew 247 more missions after that day. Every single one I thought about turning back. About all the things I could have done different. Landing faster. Getting lower, giving him 30 more seconds." Thompson tapped his cane against the ground. "I wake up every June 16th at 0620, like clockwork. Nightmares where I reach him before the explosion, where I pull him out, where he lives." He leaned on the cane. "You don't have a monopoly on guilt, Tom." Thomas stared at them. 3 old men, 3 survivors, 3 people who'd been carrying the same weight he'd been carrying. But they'd been carrying it together. "We found each other in 72, Williams said. Vietnam veterans meeting in Baltimore, recognized each other, started talking. "Been meeting once a month since then," Rodriguez added. "Sometimes just for coffee, sometimes just to sit and not have to explain." "We've helped each other live with it," Thompson said. "That's all you can do. Learn to live with it." Williams sat back down. The bench groaned. "You carried it alone, for 55 years. That's not courage, that's just pain." Michael's hand tightened on Thomas's shoulder. Thomas looked at the 3 men, at their weathered faces, at the lines carved deep by decades of waking up and choosing to keep living despite the weight. "I don't know how to let it go," he whispered. "Then don't let it go," Williams said. "Just carry it different. Carry it like he wanted you to." "How?" "By doing what he asked. By living." Thomas pulled Patricia's letter from his pocket, unfolded it. The pages rustled in the wind. He found the paragraph, read it out loud. "Daniel didn't save you so you could spend 55 years punishing yourself. He saved you so you could have a life." His voice broke on the last word. Williams nodded. "Your wife was a smart woman." "She was." Thomas folded the letter, put it away. "She knew. The whole time, and she stayed anyway." "That's love," Rodriguez said quietly. They sat in silence. The sun had dropped lower. Long shadows stretched across the grass. The groundskeeper packed up his mower, started loading it onto a trailer. "There's something you need to know," Williams said. His voice had changed, softer, more careful. About that day. About Daniel. Thomas looked up. He didn't die right away, Williams said. The explosion threw him clear. Thompson got to him. Thomas's heart stopped. Thompson nodded. I reached him maybe 2 minutes after the blast. He was hurt bad. Burns, shrapnel. But he was conscious. He said something, Thompson continued. Before he went, I need you to hear it. Thomas couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The bench felt like it was spinning. What did he say? Thompson leaned on his cane. His knuckles had gone white, gripping the handle. He was conscious when I got to him, maybe 2 minutes after the explosion. Burns on his left side, shrapnel in his chest and abdomen, too much blood. Thomas's vision tunneled. The bench, the oak tree, the 3 old men. Everything else went dark at the edges. I tried to stop the bleeding, Thompson continued, but there was too much, too many wounds. The medevac was already gone with you and Williams. He knew, Thompson said, voice rough. He knew he wasn't getting out. The wind picked up, rustled the oak leaves overhead. Thomas's hands gripped his knees so hard his fingers went numb. He said, "Tell Tommy." Thompson stopped, swallowed. He said, "Tell Tommy I didn't want him to stay. Tell him to live big enough for both of us." Thomas's chest caved in, like the cargo door had landed on him instead of Williams, like 700 pounds of steel pressing down until his ribs cracked. Those were his last words? His voice came out strangled. Yes. He was dying and he was thinking about me. He was your brother, Williams said. Of course he was thinking about you. Thomas stood, too fast. His leg buckled. Michael caught him, held him upright until the world stopped spinning. I killed him. The words tore out. It was my call, my decision to go in. I killed my baby brother. No. Williams stood too. That's not what happened. I made the choice. We all made the choice. Williams's voice rose, sharp enough to make a passing couple turn and look. You think you ordered us into that mission? You think we were following commands like robots? Thomas's jaw clenched. We voted, Rodriguez said, stepped closer. 5 of us. Show of hands. Go in or turn back. It was unanimous. But I was aircraft commander. And Daniel was a captain too, Williams interrupted. Same rank, same training. He wasn't some green private following orders. He was your equal. Rodriguez nodded. I checked the weather, gave the green light on conditions. That's on me too. I cleared the landing zone as safe, Thompson added. Said the wounded could survive long enough for extraction. My call, my responsibility. They stood in a circle around the bench. 4 old men and Michael. 5 decades of guilt spread between them like a hand of cards nobody wanted to play. He made his own choice, Williams said. His voice had gone quiet again, firm. To go back into that fire. That was his decision, not yours. But you don't get to take that away from him, Rodriguez said. His courage, his sacrifice. You don't get to make it about your guilt. He chose to save me, Williams continued. Chose to go back for the others. Chose to be the kind of man who couldn't leave people behind, even when staying meant dying. Thomas's vision blurred. He blinked but couldn't clear it. You think he was some kid who didn't know what he was doing? Williams's hands shook. He was a trained officer, a grown man. He knew exactly what he was choosing. And he made sure you'd survive to know it, Thompson finished. Silence. Just wind in the oak tree and the sound of traffic on Memorial Drive and Thomas's ragged breathing. I don't know how to live with that, Thomas whispered. None of us do, Williams said. But we learn, day by day, year by year. Rodriguez pulled a business card from his wallet, held it out. There's a group, veterans. We meet once a month at the VFW in Bethesda. First Tuesday, 7 p.m. Not therapy, just talking. Thomas took the card, His hands shook so bad the cardstock rattled. V.F.W. Post 3457. An address in Bethesda, a phone number. "You should come," Thompson said. "Next month. Bring your son if you want." "I don't know if I can." "You can," Williams said, "because he wanted you to. That's what those last words meant. Live big enough for both of us." Thomas looked at the headstone, 20 yards away, white marble glowing pink in the sunset. Daniel's name carved deep enough to last centuries. His brother had been dying, bleeding out in a rice paddy, and his last thought had been about making sure Thomas lived, not survived, lived. There was a difference. Michael's hand stayed on his shoulder, steady, Patricia's strength in their son's grip. "I need to," Thomas's voice broke. "I need to talk to him." "Go," Williams said. "We'll wait here." Thomas limped toward the grave. Each step sent lightning up his calf. The bandage had soaked through, red stains spreading on his khaki pants. He didn't care. He reached the headstone, knelt on the grass, damp seeping through his pants at the knees. His hand touched the marble, cold despite the June heat. Danny. The name caught in his throat. First time he'd said it at the grave. First time in 54 years he'd spoken to his brother here, where the body was buried. "I brought this back." He pulled the dog tag from his pocket, set it at the base of the stone. It clinked against marble. The hand-carved letters caught the fading light. "Live big enough for both." "I'm sorry it took so long," Thomas said, voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry I didn't read your letter. Didn't hear what you were trying to tell me." His other hand pressed against the carved letters of Daniel's name, the grooves worn smooth by decades of weather. "Thompson told me what you said, your last words. You were dying and you were thinking about me." His chest heaved. Tears he'd held for 54 years finally breaking through. "You wanted me to live. Not just survive, live." The wind rustled through the oak tree, carried the smell of honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass and earth. "I didn't know how. Couldn't figure out how to do it without you here. So I just existed. Went through the motions. Married Patricia, had Michael, went to work, came home. Over and over for 55 years. His voice cracked completely. "But I wasn't living, was I? I was just carrying you, like a weight, like something I had to bear because I survived and you didn't." Behind him, Michael made a sound, like he'd been holding his breath and finally let it out. "But that's not what you wanted," Thomas continued. "You told me in the letter, 'Don't carry me,' and I carried you anyway." He picked up the dog tag, held it in his palm, half a piece of steel that had lived inside his body longer than most marriages lasted. "I'm keeping this," he said. "Half of it, because you broke it in half for a reason. 2 halves. You had one, I had one." His thumb traced the engraved letters. "But I'm going to carry it different now. Not like a burden, like a reminder of what you gave me." He put the dog tag back in his pocket, over his heart. From his wallet, he pulled the photograph Rodriguez had given him. 5 men in flight suits, grinning at the camera, 2 days before everything changed. He propped it against the headstone. The colors faded, but the faces still clear. Daniel in the center, Thomas beside him. Brothers, twins, 2 halves of the same whole. "This is who we were," Thomas said. "Before the war, before the blood, before everything went wrong." His hand stayed on the marble, warm now from his palm against it. "Thank you, Danny," his voice broke. "For pulling me out, for making sure I lived, for the extra 55 years. He took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry I wasted them." Tears ran down his weathered cheeks, first time since Patricia's funeral. First time he'd let himself feel the full weight of what he'd lost. "I'm going to do better now." I'm going to try to live the way you wanted, the way Patricia wanted." He stood, knees cracking, legs screaming, the bandage completely soaked through now. "I love you, brother. I never stopped." He turned, walked back to the bench where the others waited. Williams and Rodriguez and Thompson, 3 men who understood, who'd been carrying the same weight, who'd learned to live with it instead of die from it. Michael met him halfway, put his arm around his father's shoulders, helped him walk. "You did good, Dad," Michael said, voice thick. Williams stood when they reached the bench, extended his hand again. This time, Thomas took it. Their hands clasped, calloused palm against calloused palm, the grip of men who'd survived when they shouldn't have, who'd learned to live with that. "We meet here every June 15th, Williams said. "All 3 of us. Have since 1970. Bringing cards, telling stories, making sure he's not forgotten." "Come next year," Rodriguez added. "Bring Michael. We'll teach him about his uncle, the real Daniel, not the ghost." "And come to the VFW meetings," Thompson said. "First Tuesday. We'll introduce you to the others, men who understand." Thomas nodded, couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. They exchanged phone numbers. Standing in Arlington as the sun set, as the shadows grew long across the endless rows of white stones. "He'd be proud of you," William said, "for coming here today, for finally listening." Thomas looked back at the grave one more time, the photograph propped against the stone, the weathered playing cards, the dog tag he'd left. Actually, no, he'd kept it, put it in his pocket. The headstone glowed orange-pink in the sunset, Daniel's name carved deep. "I should get him home," Michael said, his legs bleeding through. Williams nodded. "Go." But Tom, he waited until Thomas looked at him. "This isn't goodbye. We'll see you again, at the VFW, next month." "I'll be there," Thomas said, and meant it. They walked back to Michael's Honda. Thomas's leg dragged, left a thin trail of blood drops on the paved path. He'd need to go back to the hospital, get the wound checked, maybe get stitches. Tomorrow. He'd deal with it tomorrow. Michael opened the passenger door. Thomas got in. The seat felt too soft, too comfortable after kneeling on cemetery grass. Michael started the engine, backed out of the parking space, pulled onto Memorial Drive. They drove in silence. The cemetery disappeared behind them. The Washington Monument appeared ahead, lit up against the darkening sky. Thomas's phone buzzed. Text from Williams. "Proud of you, brother. See you next month." Another buzz. Rodriguez. "You're not alone anymore." Another. Thompson. "First Tuesday, 7 p.m. We'll save you a seat." Thomas stared at the messages. 3 men he'd just met. 3 strangers who understood him better than people he'd known for decades. He typed back to each. "Thank you." Michael merged onto Route 50, heading west, back toward Baltimore, toward home. "You want to get something to eat?" Michael asked. Thomas looked at his son, really looked, saw Patricia's determination in his jaw, Daniel's kindness in his eyes. "Yeah," Thomas said, "I'd like that. There's a diner off Route 40. Mom used to like it. Place that serves breakfast all day." Patricia, she'd loved diners, would order pancakes at 8 p.m. and not care who thought it was strange. "Let's go there," Thomas said. Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They drove. The sun set completely. Streetlights flickered on. The world kept turning the way it always did, whether you were ready or not. Thomas pulled Patricia's letter from his pocket, unfolded it one more time, found the last paragraph. "Then come home and live. I'll be waiting for you, wherever souls go when bodies give out." He folded the letter, put it away. Patricia was waiting, and Daniel was waiting, and he'd wasted 55 years being too afraid to honor what they'd both given him. But he was here now, in his son's car, heading to a diner, planning to meet strangers at a VFW next month. Small steps, but steps forward instead of staying frozen in 1969. "Dad?" Michael's voice pulled him back. "You okay?" Thomas looked at him. "No, but I'm going to be. That's all I'm asking for." They pulled into the diner parking lot, red neon sign, chrome siding, a place that had probably looked exactly the same since 1975. Michael turned off the engine. They sat there for a moment, father and son. 55 years and 18 months of distance between them, starting to close. "Thank you," Thomas said, "for not giving up on me." Michael's jaw worked. "Mom made me promise, before she died. Said one day you'd be ready, and I had to be there when you were. She was always smarter than me." "Yeah, she was." They got out, walked toward the diner door. Thomas's leg throbbed with each step, but he kept moving. Michael held the door open. Warm air and the smell of coffee and bacon grease rolled out. Thomas stepped through, and for the first time in 55 years felt like maybe, just maybe, he deserved to. The diner booth vinyl squeaked when Thomas slid in. Red leather cracked at the seams, years of bodies wearing it down. The table wobbled on uneven legs. Laminated menus, sticky with syrup someone hadn't wiped clean. Michael sat across from him, waved at the waitress, 60-something woman with gray hair pulled back. Name tag said, Denise. She brought 2 white ceramic mugs, coffee steaming. The cups had chips on the rims. Thomas wrapped both hands around his mug. Heat seeped into his palms, made his wedding ring warm against his finger. "When's the last time we did this?" Michael asked, sugar packets rattling as he tore one open. Thomas searched his memory. The last year blurred together like watercolors running. "Your mother's birthday, March 2022. Before the cancer came back. Before hospice. Before Patricia's voice got too weak to finish sentences. 16 months ago," Michael said, stirred his coffee. The spoon clinked against ceramic. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just unfilled space neither knew how to fill yet. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee and something sweet, maple syrup maybe. A radio played behind the counter, oldies station. Blue moon crackling through old speakers. Denise came back, order pad ready. Michael got a cheeseburger and fries. Thomas ordered chicken noodle soup. His stomach wouldn't handle more. "You still in the same apartment?" Michael asked after Denise left. "Yes." "Catonsville, 2nd floor." "Yes." "Mom's things still there?" Thomas's hands tightened on the coffee mug. The ceramic creaked. "Some of them." "You should come to our place for dinner. Sunday, maybe. Sarah keeps asking about you." Sarah, Michael's wife. Kind woman with dark, curly hair. Thomas had met her at the wedding, shook her hand, said congratulations, then avoided every family gathering after that. "I'd like that," Thomas said. Michael's eyebrows rose. "You would?" "Yes." "Okay, Sunday then, 6 o'clock. "I'll be there." Michael's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. The food came. Michael ate his burger, ketchup and grease on his fingers. Thomas managed 3 spoonfuls of soup before his stomach clenched. Too much. Too soon. He pushed the bowl aside. "Your leg okay?" Michael asked, nodded at the bloodstain on Thomas's pants. "It's fine." "That's not fine. That's soaked through." "I'll deal with it tomorrow." "Dad." "Tomorrow." Thomas's voice came out harder than he meant. "Let me have tonight first." Michael wiped his hands on a napkin, didn't push. They sat in the booth while Denise refilled their coffee. The diner had maybe 6 other customers. Old couple in the corner, trucker at the counter working on a piece of pie, 2 teenagers in a booth by the window. Normal people living normal lives, not carrying dead brothers in their bodies, not waking up at 6:20 every June 16th for 54 years. "Thompson said he wakes up at that exact time," Thomas said. Every year, like his body remembers. Michael set his coffee down. Does yours? I don't sleep on June 15th anymore. Haven't since 1970. Stay up all night. Wait for dawn. For 0620 to pass. Mom never told me that. She knew. Would stay up with me the first few years, making coffee, sitting at the kitchen table, not saying anything, just there. Thomas stared into his coffee cup, black surface reflecting the overhead lights. After a while, she stopped, went to bed normal time. I'd sit alone in the living room, counting minutes, waiting for it to be over. Michael's jaw worked. I'm sorry. Don't be. Wasn't your burden to carry. It was Mom's, though. Thomas looked up, met his son's eyes. Yes, it was. They sat with that truth between them. The radio played another song, Stand By Me. The trucker left money on the counter, walked out, bell above the door jingling. Thomas pulled Patricia's letter from his pocket, 3 pages, worn soft from being folded and unfolded. He set them on the table. She knew, he said, everything. About the guilt, about Daniel, about the way I couldn't let go. I know. She told me. When? 2 weeks before she died, when you were at the VA office filing paperwork. She asked me to come over. Michael's hands wrapped around his coffee mug, knuckles white. She said, Your father's been living in 1969 for 55 years. I've loved a man who was never fully here. The words hit like fists. She said that? Yes. And then she said she didn't regret it, that the part of you that was here was enough. Thomas's vision blurred. He blinked, kept blinking. But she made me promise something, Michael continued, voice thick now. She said one day you'd be ready, one day you'd forgive yourself. And when that day came, if it came, I had to be there. She made you promise 18 months ago. Yes. Before we stopped talking. Yes. Thomas picked up the coffee, drank. Too hot, burned his tongue. He kept drinking anyway. I almost didn't come today, Michael admitted. When Dr. Phillips's office called, I almost ignored it. Was that angry. Why didn't you? Because she asked me to. Because she believed you could still come back. Even after everything. Even after I walked away from your mother's grave. After I said, I know what you said. Michael's voice went hard. I was there. Silence, heavy as 55 years. I'm sorry, Thomas said. For what I said. For walking away. For all of it. I know. That's it? Just, I know? Michael set his coffee down, looked at his father straight on. What do you want me to say? That it's okay? That I forgive you? That we can just go back to how things were? No, I don't know what I want. Neither do I. Michael's jaw clenched. But I'm here, and you're here. That's something. Thomas nodded, couldn't speak. Denise brought the check, set it face down on the table. Michael reached for it. Thomas got there first. I've got it, Thomas said. Dad, let me, please. Michael's hand pulled back. Thomas left cash on the table, more than the bill. Denise had earned it for leaving them alone. They stood, walked to the door. Thomas's leg dragged, left small drops of blood on the linoleum. Denise would have to clean that up. He'd leave extra next time. Outside, the parking lot lights hummed. Moths fluttered around them. The air had cooled, June night settling in with cricket sounds from somewhere. Michael unlocked the car. They got in. He started the engine but didn't pull out. There's something else, Michael said. Something Mom wanted you to know. She put it in a letter for me too. Thomas turned in his seat, leg screaming. Michael pulled an envelope from the glove box, different from Patricia's letter to Thomas. This one addressed to Michael in her handwriting. She wrote you a letter too? Yes, instructions, things to tell you when you were ready. "I'm ready," Thomas said. Michael opened the envelope, pulled out a single page, read it silently first, then out loud. "Michael, if you're reading this to your father, it means he finally went to see Daniel. It means he's finally ready to hear what I couldn't tell him to his face." Michael's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, kept reading. "Tell him about your middle name, about why I chose it. He never asked, never wanted to know, but he needs to know now." Thomas's chest tightened. "I named you Michael Daniel Warren, after his brother, the uncle you never met but who gave you your father. Without Daniel's sacrifice, you wouldn't exist." Michael folded the letter, set it on his lap. "I've known since I was 8, he said. "Mom told me, showed me pictures, made sure I knew who Daniel was, because you wouldn't talk about him." Thomas's hands shook. He pressed them against his knees. "I grew up knowing my middle name was a memorial to a dead man," Michael continued. "Knowing I was named after the ghost that lived in our house, the brother who was more present than my father ever was." The words cut deeper than any scalpel. "Michael, I'm not done." Michael's voice stayed level, hard. "You know what else Mom told me?" Thomas shook his head. "She said when I was born, you held me for 10 minutes, looked at my face, then handed me back to her and walked out of the room. Didn't come back for 3 hours. I needed air." "You needed to not see Daniel in your son's face," Michael interrupted. "Because I had his eyes, brown with gold flecks. Mom said you couldn't look at me without seeing him." Thomas's throat closed. "Is that true?" Michael asked. The parking lot lights hummed. A car passed on Route 40. Someone's dog barked in the distance. "Yes," Thomas whispered. "For how long?" "For years, until you were 4, maybe 5. Until your face became your own. Until you stopped looking like photographs of Daniel as a child." Michael's hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles bone white. "Mom knew that too. And she stayed. And she loved you. And she made sure I knew my uncle, made sure I understood why you were the way you were." He turned to look at his father, eyes wet. "She carried both of you, Daniel's memory and your guilt, for 50 years. Thomas couldn't breathe right. The car felt too small, air too thin. "I didn't mean—" "I know you didn't. But that's what happened anyway." Silence. Just the engine idling and the parking lot lights humming and Thomas's heart hammering against his ribs. "I don't know how to fix this," Thomas said finally. "Any of it." "You can't fix it," Michael said. "It's not broken. It's just what it is." "Then what do we do?" "We start over. Today. Right now." Michael put the car in reverse, backed out of the parking space, pulled onto Route 40. "Where are we going?" Thomas asked. "Home. Your place. You need to change that bandage and we need to make sure you're not bleeding out." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're leaving blood everywhere. We're going to your apartment. I'm going to help you change the bandage. Then we're going to figure out what comes next." Thomas started to argue, stopped, let his son take control, let someone else carry the weight for once. They drove through Catonsville, past the grocery store where Patricia used to shop every Thursday, past the library where she volunteered on Saturday mornings, past the funeral home where they'd held her service. Michael pulled into the apartment complex, parked in visitor parking. "You ready?" he asked. Thomas looked up at his second-floor apartment, 18 stairs. Same place he'd lived since 1975, where he'd raised Michael, where Patricia had died, where her coffee mug still sat unwashed in the sink. "No," Thomas said, "but let's go anyway." The apartment door stuck. Thomas shouldered it open, same way he'd been opening it for 49 years. The hinges squeaked, metal on metal. He kept meaning to oil them. Michael followed him inside, flipped the light switch. Fluorescent bulb in the kitchen flickered twice before catching. Harsh white light that made everything look tired. The place smelled like old coffee and dust. Patricia's coffee mug sat in the sink where he'd left it 2 years ago. White ceramic with blue flowers. The lipstick mark on the rim had faded to pale pink, but it was still there. Thomas walked to the kitchen table, sat in his usual chair, the one that faced the window. His leg throbbed. Each pulse sent fire up his calf. The bandage had soaked through completely, red stain spreading down to his shoe. Michael opened cabinets, looking for first aid supplies. "Where do you keep gauze?" "Bathroom." "Under the sink." Footsteps down the hall, cabinet opening. Michael came back with an old first aid kit, red plastic box with a white cross. Patricia had bought it at the drugstore in 1983. Most of the supplies were probably expired. "Sit back," Michael said. "Let me see it." Thomas pulled his pant leg up. The bandage stuck to his skin, dried blood acting like glue. Michael worked it free slowly. Thomas gritted his teeth, didn't make a sound. The wound underneath looked angry, red and swollen, stitches pulling at the edges. Some had broken. Clear fluid leaked out mixed with blood. "This needs a doctor," Michael said. "Tomorrow." "Dad!" "I said tomorrow." Thomas's voice came out harder than he meant. "Please, just bandage it. Let me have tonight." Michael's jaw clenched, but he opened the first aid kit, found ancient gauze pads, a roll of medical tape yellowed with age. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic from a brown bottle. The liquid stung, smelled like rubbing alcohol and something medicinal. Thomas watched his son's hands work. Gentle, careful. Patricia's hands had moved the same way when she changed his bandages after he came home from Vietnam. Michael wrapped fresh gauze, secured it with tape. "That'll hold until morning, but you're going back to Dr. Phillips. No arguments." "Okay." Michael packed the first aid kit, stood, looked around the apartment. Patricia's chair sat in the corner. The cushion still held her shape. Nobody had sat there since October 2022. Thomas couldn't make himself. Michael walked to it, ran his hand over the worn fabric. "You haven't changed anything," Michael said. "No." "Her mug still in the sink?" "Yes." Michael walked to the kitchen, stood looking at it. White ceramic, blue flowers, that ghost of lipstick on the rim. "Can I?" he asked. Thomas nodded, couldn't speak. Michael turned on the hot water, let it run until steam rose, squirted dish soap into the sink, picked up the mug carefully, like it might break, like it was made of something more precious than ceramic. He washed it, rinsed it, dried it with a dish towel, set it in the cabinet with the other mugs. The cabinet door closed with a soft click. "Goodbye," Michael whispered. So quiet Thomas almost didn't hear. Thomas's vision blurred. He looked away, out the window at the parking lot, at the streetlight casting orange glow on the asphalt. Michael came back to the table, sat across from him, same seat Patricia used to sit in, where she'd read the morning paper while Thomas made instant coffee, where they'd eaten 50 years of breakfasts together. "What do we do now?" Michael asked. Thomas didn't know. 55 years of knowing exactly what to do. Wake up, go to work, come home, don't think, don't feel, don't remember. Now that structure had crumbled, and he was lost. "I don't know," he admitted. "Mom's letter said to live. What does that mean for you?" Thomas thought about it. Really thought. Not the automatic responses he'd been giving for decades. What did living mean? "Go back to the doctor tomorrow," he said. "Get this leg properly treated." "What else?" "Go to the VFW meeting, first Tuesday, like William said." "And?" "Come to dinner at your place on Sunday." Michael nodded. "That's a start." They sat in silence. The refrigerator hummed. The wall clock ticked. Normal sounds of a normal apartment where a normal person might live. "Thank you," Thomas said. "For today. For not letting me run." Mom made me promise. Still, you could have walked away. Should have. I gave you every reason to. You're my father, Michael said. Simple as that, like it explained everything. Maybe it did. Thomas stood. His leg protested but held. He limped to the bedroom. Michael followed. The closet door stood open. Patricia's clothes still hung there. Dresses she'd worn to church. Sweaters she'd lived in during winter. The blue bathrobe she'd worn every morning while making coffee. Thomas reached for the bathrobe, pulled it off the hanger. The fabric was soft, worn thin at the elbows. It smelled faintly of her perfume. White shoulders, even after 2 years. I need to donate these, he said. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I'll help, when you're ready. Thomas held the bathrobe for another moment, then hung it back up, closed the closet door. In the bathroom, he brushed his teeth, took his blood pressure medication. The same routine he'd done every night for decades. But tonight it felt different, like each small action mattered, like he was choosing to keep living instead of just surviving by habit. He changed into pajamas, old cotton pants and a t-shirt from a 1995 Orioles game. Patricia had bought him that shirt, said the orange brought out his eyes. He'd worn it so many times the logo had cracked and faded. In bed, he lay on his side. His side. Patricia's side empty beside him. 2 years empty. But tonight the emptiness felt different. Less like an open wound, more like space that might someday be filled with something else. Not a replacement, just something. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Text from Williams. Saw you made it home. Good. Sleep well, brother. See you next month. Another buzz. Rodriguez. First step is always the hardest. You took it today. Proud of you. Another. Thompson. June 16th comes every year whether we want it or not. But we don't have to face it alone anymore. Thomas read each message twice. 3 men he'd known for 4 hours. 3 strangers who understood him better than people he'd known his whole life. He typed back to each. Thank you. Then added, see you first Tuesday. Michael appeared in the doorway. You okay in here? Yes. I'm going to sleep on the couch, in case you need anything. You don't have to. I want to. Thomas nodded. Okay. Good night, Dad. Good night, Michael. His son's footsteps faded down the hall. The couch springs creaked. The apartment settled into night sounds, refrigerator humming, pipes ticking. The upstairs neighbor walking around. Thomas turned off the lamp. Darkness filled the room. Not complete darkness. Light from the parking lot leaked through the blinds, cast stripes across the ceiling. He pulled the dog tag from his pants pocket, had taken it out before changing into pajamas. Now he held it in his fist, metal warm from his body heat. Half a dog tag, half of Daniel. The piece that had lived inside him for 55 years. He'd told Daniel he was keeping it, not as a burden, as a reminder. Thomas got out of bed, went to his dresser, found his key ring in the top drawer, unclipped the keys, threaded the dog tag onto the ring, clipped it back together. Tomorrow he'd put it on his rearview mirror, where he could see it every day, where sunlight could catch the engraved letters, where Daniel's last message could remind him what he was supposed to be doing. Live big enough for both. Not survive, live. There was a difference. He got back in bed, set the keys on the nightstand, lay down on his side facing Patricia's empty pillow. I went, he whispered into the darkness. I finally went to see him, and I met the men he saved. And I'm going to try. To do what you both wanted. To live. The darkness didn't answer, but the apartment felt less heavy, like something had shifted. Like a door had opened somewhere and fresh air was finally getting in. His breathing slowed. Sleep pulled at him. For the first time in 55 years, he didn't fight it. Didn't stay awake waiting for 6:20. Didn't count the hours until another June 16th could pass. He closed his eyes and dreamed. Not of fire, not of blood, not of Daniel running back into the flames. He dreamed of a Saturday morning, spring 1968, before the war, before everything changed. Daniel in the kitchen of their mother's house, making pancakes, singing House of the Rising Sun, off-key and loud. Their mother laughing, telling him to hush. Daniel grinning, singing louder. Thomas, younger, whole, unmarked by guilt, throwing a dish towel at his brother's head. Daniel catching it, throwing it back. Both of them laughing. Just brothers, just boys, just two halves of something that used to be whole. In the dream, Thomas opened his mouth, started singing with him, off-key and loud, the way Daniel always wanted him to, the way he never did when Daniel was alive. But in the dream, he sang, and Daniel's grin got wider, and for just a moment, everything was okay. Thomas woke once in the night. 3 a.m. by the bedside clock, red numbers glowing. His leg ached. The bandage felt tight. He could hear Michael snoring softly from the living room. His son, named after the uncle he'd never met, carrying Daniel's name forward into the future. Thomas got up, limped to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, took his pain medication a few hours early, stood at the sink looking out the window at the parking lot. His Camry sat in its usual spot. Today really, he'd drive to Dr. Phillips, get the leg checked, make sure infection wasn't setting in. Sunday, he'd drive to Michael's house, meet his daughter-in-law properly, maybe meet grandchildren if Michael had them. Thomas realized he didn't know if he was a grandfather, had been too lost in 1969 to ask. First Tuesday, he'd drive to the VFW, meet Williams and Rodriguez and Thompson, meet other men who understood what it meant to come home when others didn't. June 15th next year, he'd drive to Arlington, stand at Daniel's grave with his son beside him, with the other survivors, with playing cards and photographs and stories about who Daniel really was. Small steps, one day, then another, not healed, healing. He went back to bed, lay down, pulled the sheet up. Sleep came easier this time, and when he dreamed again, it was of Patricia, sitting in her chair, smiling, not saying anything, just there, the way she'd always been, even when he couldn't see it, even when he was too far inside his own grief to notice. She'd been there, loving him, waiting for him to find his way back. In the dream, he walked to her, knelt by her chair, put his head in her lap the way he used to when things got too hard. Her hand touched his hair, gentle. "I'm trying," he whispered. "I know," she said. "That's all I ever wanted." When he woke the second time, dawn light was creeping through the blinds. His leg hurt less, the medication working, or maybe just time doing what time does. He got up, made coffee, real coffee, not instant. The smell filled the apartment, rich and dark and alive. Michael appeared in the hallway, hair sticking up, eyes puffy with sleep. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep. Bad dreams?" "No." Thomas poured 2 cups of coffee, handed one to his son. "Good ones, actually." They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Thomas and Patricia had eaten 50 years of breakfasts, where they'd done taxes and paid bills and argued about where to go on vacation, where they'd built a life together, one ordinary morning at a time. "What do you want to do today?" Michael asked. Thomas looked at the calendar on the wall. June 16th, 2024. 55 years exactly. Every other year he'd spent this day in darkness, waiting for it to pass, for the anniversary to be over so he could go back to not thinking, not feeling, not living. This year, something different. "Let's go to the hardware store," Thomas said. "Get oil for the door hinges, maybe some paint for the bathroom. It's been needing it." Michael's eyebrows rose. "You want to fix up the apartment?" "Yeah, I do." "Okay." Michael sipped his coffee. "Then let's do that." They finished their coffee, got dressed. Thomas changed the bandage himself while Michael waited in the living room. The wound looked better in daylight, less angry. Still needed a doctor, but not immediately. They drove to the hardware store. Thomas drove this time. His Camry, with the dog tag hanging from the rearview mirror now, catching morning light. Daniel's name spinning slowly as Thomas turned corners. The hardware store smelled like wood shavings and motor oil and new rubber. They bought door oil, paint, brushes, drop cloths, things to fix what could be fixed. Back at the apartment, they worked. Thomas oiled the hinges while Michael moved furniture away from the bathroom walls. The door swung smooth now, no more squeak. Small thing, but it mattered. They painted the bathroom walls, sky blue. Patricia would have liked it. She'd wanted to repaint for years. Thomas had always said, later. Always said, next month. Always said, when I have time. Now he had nothing but time, and a son beside him, and work that needed doing. They painted until noon, broke for sandwiches, sat on the floor eating because the table was covered in drop cloths. "You know what day it is?" Michael asked. "Yes." "And you're okay?" Thomas looked at the half-painted bathroom, at the mess they'd made, at his son sitting on the floor beside him covered in paint spatters. "No," he said, "but I'm here, and that's something." "Yeah," Michael said. "It is." They finished the bathroom by 3 p.m., cleaned the brushes, put away the supplies, stood back and looked at their work. The walls glowed soft blue, like morning sky, like hope looks if you squint. "Mom would have loved this," Michael said. "Yeah, she would have." Thomas's phone buzzed. Text from Dr. Phillips. "Mr. Warren, you missed your follow-up. Please call to reschedule. Dr. P." He called, made an appointment for Monday morning. Another text. "Williams, how you holding up today?" Thomas typed back. "Better than yesterday." Williams, "That's all any of us can do. One day better than the last." At 4 p.m., Michael said he needed to go home. Sarah would be expecting him. "Sunday," Michael reminded him. 6 o'clock. I'll text you the address." "I'll be there." They stood at the door, father and son, the hinges no longer squeaking when Thomas opened it. "You going to be okay tonight?" Michael asked. "Yeah, I think so. Call me if you need to. I don't care what time." "Okay." Michael walked to his car, turned back. "I'm proud of you, Dad. For today, for yesterday, for trying." Thomas's throat closed. He nodded, couldn't speak. Michael got in his car, drove away. Thomas went back inside. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and coffee and possibility. He walked to Patricia's chair, sat in it for the first time in 2 years. The cushion had lost her shape, but it held his weight, supported him, let him rest. He pulled Daniel's letter from his pocket, read it again. The words he should have read 55 years ago. "Don't carry me, Tommy. I'm not that heavy, brother." He folded the letter, put it in his wallet, where he'd carry it from now on, not as a weight, as a reminder that Daniel wanted him to live, that Patricia wanted him to live, that living meant showing up, trying, doing the next right thing, even when you didn't know what that was. The afternoon light slanted through the window, golden, warm, June 16th, 2024. 0620 had come and gone while they were painting. Thomas had missed it, missed the moment he'd been dreading for 55 years. And the world hadn't ended. Daniel was still gone. Patricia was still gone. But Thomas was still here. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that was what they'd wanted all along. He stood, went to the bedroom, opened the closet, looked at Patricia's clothes hanging there. Not today, but soon. He'd donate them, let someone else wear them. Let them have a second life the way Daniel had wanted Thomas to have a second life. He closed the closet door, not locking it away, just closing it. There was a difference. His leg ached. He took more medication, changed the bandage again. The wound looked better. Ina, slow, but healing, like him. At 6 p.m., he made dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, ate at the kitchen table. First time in months he'd eaten a real meal, not just coffee and maybe some crackers. The eggs tasted good. The toast was crispy. He was hungry. Realized he'd been hungry for a long time without noticing. After dinner, he washed the dishes, including the mug he'd left in the sink. Patricia's mug. It went in the cabinet with the others, clean, ready to be used again someday. At 8 p.m., he sat in the living room, turned on the TV, found a baseball game, Orioles playing someone. He didn't care who, just liked the sound of it. The crack of the bat, the announcer's voice, the crowd noise, all the sounds of life continuing. At 10 p.m., he went to bed. Lay on his back this time. Both sides of the bed empty now. But the emptiness felt different. Like space waiting to be filled with something new. Like possibility instead of loss. He closed his eyes and slept. Without nightmares. Without waking at 6:20. Without counting the hours until another anniversary could pass. He slept and dreamed of tomorrow. The end. Two halves of a dog tag. Two halves of a life. Beginning, finally, to fit together. I didn't write this story to tell you what to feel. I wrote it because I've sat across from men like Thomas Warren, men who carry weights nobody else can see, who survived when brothers didn't, who've spent lifetimes asking, why me? Maybe you know someone like him. A husband who came home from war but left part of himself behind. A father who was there but not really there. A friend who carries something too heavy to name. Maybe you are someone like him. Here's what Thomas teaches us. Permission to live doesn't come from the dead. It comes from choosing every morning to keep showing up. From sons who refuse to let go. From strangers who become brothers at gravesides. From wives who love us even when we can't love ourselves. If this story found you, if you saw yourself in these pages, know this. Whatever you're carrying, you don't have to carry it alone. The weight doesn't honor them. Living does. That's not a lesson. That's just the truth as I understand it. And maybe that's enough. Author's note. This story is a work of fiction, created solely for entertainment and emotional reflection. It does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence, self-harm, or harmful behavior. All characters, names, events, and circumstances are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or deceased, or to actual events is purely coincidental. The medical scenarios depicted have been simplified for narrative purposes. If you or someone you know is struggling with trauma, survivor's guilt, or post-traumatic stress, please seek support from qualified mental health professionals or veteran support services such as the Veterans Crisis Line.